Thank you for joining today's webinar for organisers of AgShows and events. That includes those who organise events such as sheepdog trials, sheep shows and much more. I'm Jodie Rizet O'Brien and I'm one of the EID implementation team at Primary Industries and Regions. Tonight we're going to cover off on why EID, what's changing, the key dates that you need to be aware of, reporting and recording obligations for ag shows and events, and where to get help and key resources and where you can access those. And we're going to finish off with a Q&A. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Tara Vandeleur, to talk about EID and your responsibilities. Tara is an NIS officer for animal biosecurity, having worked for primary industries and regions since 2006. She specialises in livestock traceability and has focused much of her time on the implementation of sheep and goat electronic ID over the past few years. Tara is also a farmer living on their property at Tintinara in the upper southeast with their three sons. At this point, I'd like to welcome Tara. Thanks.
Thanks, Jodie. Thanks for joining us, everyone. South Australia is implementing electronic identification, or EID, for sheep and farm goats. And this is going to involve things that you as a show or event organiser need to know about. But before we get into the changes and what this actually means for you and your event, I'm just going to briefly touch on what an EID tag actually is, especially benefiting those who are not involved directly with the livestock industry in your day-to-day life. So an EID device, or an electronic identification device, is a tag that identifies animals using a microchip. The microchip contains a unique serial number called the RFID that can be read using a handheld scanner. The internal RFID number is linked to a visual code called the NLAS ID, which is printed on the outside of the tag. So the RFID number and the NLAS ID are linked and both recorded on the NLAS database. But why are we actually transitioning to EID for sheep and goats at all? Well, in short, the answer is that our current visual or mob-based traceability system is no longer considered good enough for the world that we're operating in. A 2020 evaluation on several thousand sheep abattoirs in Victoria found that there were major differences in traceability outcomes between sheep with just visual tags and those with electronic ID tags. For visually identified sheep, it was only possible to trace all of the locations that the sheep had been on for the past 30 days for 70% of the visually identified sheep, compared to 99.6% for those identified with an EID tag. This obviously impacts our ability to trace stock in a timely way in the event of a disease outbreak or residue issue. And the longer we take to trace stock, we increase the likelihood of its spread. It results of us being locked out of our markets for longer, and this impacts all sectors of the supply chain. It's been estimated that a foot and mouth outbreak, for example, could cost the Australian industry over $80 billion over 10 years. But we do need to remember that EID is not a new technology. It's been well tried and tested. In Australia, we've had cattle EID operating since 2004, and in Victoria, they've had mandatory sheep and goat EID operating since 2017. And lastly, the Australian sheep and goat industries are heavily export oriented, with 70% of our sheep meat, 95% of goat meat, and 98% of our wool exported. Our industry strongly relies on our ability to market our sheep and goat products overseas, and anything that jeopardises this is seen as a real risk. The National Livestock Identification System, or the NLAS, is a system in Australia that identifies and tracks livestock for disease and food safety purposes. It's used to record the movements of cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, bison and buffalo. The NLS combines these following three elements to enable the lifetime traceability of animals. Firstly, we have all livestock identified with a permanent identification tag or a device. Secondly, that all physical locations are identified by the means of a property identification code, or PIC, and all livestock location data and movements are recorded on the central NLS database. So we need tags, we need PICs, and we need a database. The transition to sheep and goat EID is not going to change how this NLS works. These three elements remain the fundamentals of the system. However, it is changing the type of traceability information that we use to track our sheep and goats through the system, moving from visual mob-based information to individual EID information. So the NLS is underpinned by state and territory laws. Event organisers such as yourselves have always had legal NLS obligations under the livestock regulations. This is including the need to record movements of cattle, sheep, goats and pigs in the past. In January this year, amendments to the Livestock Regulations 2013, which underpin the Livestock Act 1997, came into effect in South Australia. The amended regs support changes to the sheep and goat tagging and scanning and reporting obligations through the sheep and goat supply chain, including special event organisers, which includes ag shows and sporting events. So the change to EID will mean that show and event organisers will now need to record EID information on the database instead of just mob-based information for sheep and goats like you've done in the past. But you might be asking yourself why shows even need to worry about traceability. So although shows and events are not really a commercial part of the livestock supply chain, you are still part of the livestock industry more broadly. And shows and events actually pose a significant biosecurity risk, and there are a range of factors that influence this. So at shows and events, we often have multiple species congregating at the one location. We have multiple source properties supplying livestock that are then congregating at the one location. We've got often livestock with different health statuses. We've got many livestock producers that actually attend shows and then go back to their own properties and interact with their own livestock. There's a close interaction with the public, with unknown travel histories, for example, and then livestock return back to their source property, taking with it any potential disease. So it makes traceability really, really important. So I thought to demonstrate the potential risk a little bit more clearly, I thought we could quickly work through a bit of a hypothetical scenario using a bit of our creative imagination. My colleague Denise Rendell, who many of you already know, had put this map together showing the movement of sheep from the non-merino section of last year's Adelaide Royal Show back to their home properties. It involved 43 properties originating from 3 states. So you can see that if there was a disease at the show, the potential for disease spread is significant. Now, for the sake of our hypothetical example, let's pretend that we overlay this map with the movement of other relevant species that also attended the show at the same time, such as other merino sheep, cattle, pigs, or goats, and layer on top of that then the number of livestock producers that simply attended the show as a spectator and then travelled home to their properties. And lastly, let's try to imagine a final layer that shows the number of people in the general public who attended the show who had recently travelled overseas, for example, to Bali, where foot and mouth is endemic. It doesn't take long to understand the potential for a biosecurity nightmare. So the ability to rapidly trace the movement of livestock to and from a show is absolutely critical. So we've quickly touched on the reasons why we need a move to sheep and goat EID. Now we're going to work through what this means for you and your event. So hopefully you might be somewhat familiar with the EID sheep and goat implementation timeline for South Australia. It includes both the commencement of mandatory EID tagging and the commencement of mandatory EID scanning and recording on the NLS database. So we're going to work through it. So from 1 Jan 2025, so the January that's just gone, all sheep and farm goats born on or after this date must be EID tagged before leaving the property of birth. Processors began EID scanning and recording sheep and goats that came to the facility with EID tags. P2P movements need to be EID scanned and recorded again for those animals that are moving via P2P with an EID device. And show and event organisers, such as you, begin EID scanning and recording. From 1 July this year, sale yards begin EID scanning and recording EID identified animals that come into their facility. And from 1 Jan 2027, all sheep and farm goats must be EID tagged before leaving the property. It means from the period from 1 Jan 2025 to 1 Jan 2027, we'll be operating in a hybrid traceability system in SA, where both the mob-based system and the EID system will be in place. So during this two-year transition period, you may see sheep and goats attending your events with either visual tags or EID tags. These will need to be recorded differently on the database, and we're going to go through that a little bit later. But what does this timeline actually mean for you as a show, event, or an organiser? Well, from 1 Jan 2025, so this year, when you'll begin to see sheep and goats with EID tags at your events. EID tagged sheep and farm goats will need to be EID scanned and recorded on the database as a sighted livestock movement within the 2 days of arrival. This is the same as what's been required for cattle that's been attending your sheep up to now. Visually tagged sheep and farm goats must continue to be recorded as a mob-based movement on the database until 1 Jan 2027. So what you'll need to do this, you'll need a showground property identification code or a PIC, which most probably already have. You need an NLS database account. The account type is a sporting event for shows and special events. You need to understand which animals at your event have visual tags and which have EID tags. And then you need to be able to scan EID tagged animals and record those movements as a sighted livestock movement on the database within the 2 days. And again, you need to record visually tagged movements as a mob-based movement. You also need to have a process in place to collect movement documents such as NVDs, National Health Declarations from all sheep and goat producers, which copies need to be kept for 2 years. So some shows might choose to engage a local stock agent or another producer to carry out the EID scanning of sheep, goats and cattle that are EID tagged on your behalf. And this is absolutely fine. However, you just need to be aware that the legal responsibility still rests with the show and event organizer. So if someone else is doing this on your behalf, you must ensure that it's actually done. So it's a good idea to follow up and check. And remember that sheep and goats that only have visual tags still need to be recorded as a mob-based movement. We're reminded that sheep and goats may attend your events for a range of activities, and this might include for exhibition or display, such as stud sheep, and stud sheep are very commonly EID tagged, so that's just a bit of a heads up. Judging competitions, shearing competitions, yard dog competitions, and farmyard nursery. There's maybe will be more, so any reason that a sheep or farm goat might be attending. So you as the event organizer have the ultimate responsibility to ensure that sheep and goats that are attending for any of these reasons or more are recorded on the NLS database. This may mean that you have to liaise with the different people on your committee who are convening the different sections to ensure that all required information is gathered and recorded. So once the animals have been EID scanned, so that's sheep and goats and cattle, if you have them, you'll need to record them as a sighted livestock movement on the NLS database. So a sighted livestock movement is a way of recording that an animal has temporarily been on a property, such as a showground, without actually doing a full transfer on and off. Animals can be scanned and uploaded to the database in one transaction. So it's relatively simple. You can simply cut and paste the list of tag numbers into the fields on the database, along with the showground pick and the date of the show or event. And I've pointed those little fields out with my hand there. We do have fact sheets available on the IRC website that go through this into more detail, and I've got a list of these help resources at the end of the presentation. Another option for recording your movement is to use the new NLS Buddy app. The app is free to download and a simple way of recording your sheep and goat movements via your phone or a tablet, rather than logging on to the NLS database itself. It also can record both mob-based movements and EID sighted movements, and it also can record cattle movements. So it's really, really handy and highly recommended that you have a look at this for your to help out with your requirements. And EID scanners, look, they come in a range of types and prices. All of them do scan RFID tags, but some have greater functionalities or tricks than others, and the price points kind of reflect this. All of these are available freely in the market at the moment. And lastly, in terms of extra resources and help, we have gone through this really quickly. We understand that's a lot to take in. So the Integrity Systems Company, ISC, has a range of fact sheets and step-by-step how-to videos and other resources that can help you with your NLIS activities. So we've got their website listed. They have a specific cited livestock tech tip fact sheet, which goes through everything in real step-by-step detail, which is really helpful. We've also got listed the ISC customer service or help desk number. They also have a email address, which is listed there. So if you want to you can email them a query and they can get back to you, or if you have a question out of hours, you can email them. And then PIRSA has that, we have our own sheep and goat EID web page with all sorts of information. So questions?
Tara, thanks for your presentation. We've got a few questions that have come in, and we're also joined by Denise Rendell, who many of you know, who's our Senior NILS Officer in Biosecurity. So first question actually I'm going to pose to you, Denise. How do you update your details on the PIC register?
Okay, so you can either do it through PIRSA online, or you can contact the PIC registration team by email. They need to have it in writing, so you can update all of the details with them. The other thing you should also update is your NLS database account. That's separate to PIRSA, that's managed by Integrity Systems. So you need to update those details as well.
Thanks. Next question is, what do you do as an event organizer if you've got untagged livestock, such as farm sheep or goats?
For untagged sheep or goats, I would always recommend that in your show box you actually bring some tags with you just in case anything loses its tag on the way to the show. So, and also make sure that you've got the appropriate applicator. Some shows do have tags, but not all.
Thanks. One more. As an event organizer, how do I get the site pick, say for the AgShow or location where the event's been held?
So to get the site pick, you can either contact the show society itself or the field day society and ask them for the pick number, or you can actually in a database account search for the pick through the search the pick function, and that will come up with the show societies or the field days sites pick.
Thank you. Tara, one for you. Could you just clarify which animals need to be scanned and the dates for a show or event? Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. From 1st of January of this year, any sheep, cattle, or goats that arrive at your show or event with an electronic identification tag need to be scanned and recorded on the database as a sighted movement. This might include young sheep that were born this year or young goats, but it also could involve older sheep that were tagged with an electronic device voluntarily. So this might be stud sheep, for example. They are often EID tagged and they often attend events.
Thanks. That's a perfect segue to the next question, which I might pose to you, Denise. How do we tell the difference between an NLIS tag and a management tag?
So if you have a look at all of these tags, you'll see that they all have a map of Australia on them. And that's the NLIS logo. So everything that is stamped with an NLIS logo is an accredited NLIS tag. The management tags do not have this logo on it. So that's the important difference.
Thanks. Another one for you, Tara. In the event of a shearing comp, does every animal need to be scanned or just one from the mob?
Well, it depends if those animals have got EID tags or if they've got visual tags. So if they're tagged with electronic tags, then all of the animals in that consignment or all of those animals that are arriving for that event will need to be scanned. However, if they've got visual tags, then you only need to record those animals as a mob-based movement on the database.
Thank you. And another one here, Tara, for you. Can we use a member's or someone else's scanner, or do they have to purchase one?
No, you can use a scanner that another one of your members or maybe your local stock agent might be happy for you to borrow. So you don't need to buy a scanner if you have access to one elsewhere.
Thank you. Denise, one for you. Are mob-based transfers permitted after the 1st of January 2027?
No, they won't be permissible. At that point, everything that's arriving in terms of sheep and farmed goats will be required to have an electronic tag in its ear. So in that situation, everything will have to be scanned and done as a sighted transfer or sighted movement recorded on the NLS database.
Thank you. Tara, a question here for you. Where do you purchase a scanner or wand from?
Electronic scanners can be purchased via your local rural reseller, or otherwise you can jump online and buy your wands directly from the manufacturer in that way.
And Prime Industries and Regions will put together a fact sheet of some of the manufacturers and resellers, and they're available for scanner and wands. So check that out for more details. Tara and Denise, thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us tonight. Thanks so much. Cheers.